Watching this beautiful Yorkshire countryside unfold, you could be forgiven for thinking that all is well with this United Kingdom of ours. But of course it's not. Our country is sick and in need of treatment. A restorative course of therapy is called for before the patient enters the throes of terminal decline, and all that we once held dear is lost. I do wonder these days whether one's relevance in the world is inversely proportional to one's age. The older we get, the less relevant we become to what we call the establishment. You know, the name we give to those all too hidden powers which monitor and control our lives. To my mind, there is much more to this than just a bit of good old-fashioned age discrimination. The longer we have lived, the more we have lived through, and the less susceptible we are to being gaslighted, patronised, and generally controlled by vested interests in both government and the corporate world, whose only motives are self-enrichment, self-empowerment, and above all, self-preservation. Let's face it, our so-called leaders, of whatever political stripe, have no interest whatsoever in the welfare of ordinary working people. We are just a problem to be managed, a majority to be silenced, a standing army to be kept emasculated, lest notions of fairness, freedom and equality rise too close to the surface of society's ambitions. Subjugation is the order of the day, and every operation of governments, corporate overlords and mainstream media is focused upon this task more than any other. The purpose of this strategy of command and control of the masses is, I believe, twofold. Firstly, through distraction and division, to divert our attention from an obvious reality, which is that for the last 4 decades or so, we have lost what modest amounts of wealth and power we enjoyed since the rebuilding of the country in the wake of World War II. Wealth and power, just like energy, cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form to another. This law of the conservation of energy is the perfect metaphor with which to illustrate the extent to which we have been utterly screwed over these past decades. The inevitable outcome of this ongoing process, where the wealth and power of the working population is continually being transferred to the rich and powerful, if left unchecked, is the raising temperature of societal resentment to boiling point. This is the law of entropy at work. This is the defining story of our age. We are in the process of regressing back to a time when the masses owned nothing and relied upon the rich and powerful to throw them the scraps necessary for survival. The second purpose of the controlling narrative is to perpetuate the notion that the working and middle classes are unworthy of agency and self-determination. With very few and increasingly fewer exceptions, self-advancement, prosperity, professional success and security in today's world is confined to those fortunate enough to have been born to a handful of elite families. I heard on the news this week that a survey has revealed that the over 50s in this country no longer feel relevant. Now, whether this is a normal function of ageing in a dynamic world, or whether there is something more nuanced relating to changing attitudes amongst rulers and we the ruled, now that's a question worth exploring. Now, personally, I don't care about people's origins, religion, culture, appearance, identity, age, or beliefs, so long as they are basically good at heart and try to live a life of good deeds and kind gestures wherever possible. I hate prejudice in all its ugly manifestations, not least because, like most of you out there I suspect, I've been the subject of it myself on more than one occasion. Prejudice is just the passive form of oppression and can ultimately make victims of us all if allowed to rampage unchecked. All of that said, there are times when I actually feel that modern society, in all the ways in which it operates, is institutionally prejudiced. I don't necessarily mean that this is always consciously brought about, nor that it represents malign intent in one quarter or another, though I'm willing to bet that in some places it does. I'm simply saying that this is the best explanation I can arrive at for these feelings of irrelevance in older age. I don't think I'm particularly untypical of someone in his early 60s. I'm a late baby boomer. I was born to a working class family. Both my parents held full-time jobs down. I was christened in a church. I was married in the same church. I'm not particularly religious in the conventional sense, but I am nominally an Englishman with a Christian heritage. I've spent my working life in public service and have always held a strong sense of community, loyalty and duty. I still laugh raucously at old British comedy episodes from a time when we did not fear the oppressive hand of state disapproval just for finding entertainment in something now deemed inappropriate but then deemed harmless. Demographically speaking, I should be the last person on earth to feel irrelevant. Yet, like many, sometimes I do. Why on earth should this be? I believe in embracing both traditional and modern values as long as they work for the general good. These values, to my mind, are rarely mutually exclusive because they occupy different places in time. However, they all have relevance, and there is space for both in a fair world. It just seems to be that the old values which served me so well through life are now regarded by those with the whip hand as outdated and irrelevant. Sagely voices with the wisdom of age are largely dismissed or ignored today in favour of a shallow, synthetic, self-serving code for living a life devoid of honour, sincerity or decency. So, I pose the question, do you, my fellow boomers and Gen X's, feel the same way? Do you feel increasingly irrelevant in the modern age? Do you, like me, feel that nothing you say or do anymore will make very much difference? There are many cultures in which those of advancing years are revered for a wisdom accrued over a lifetime and a level head which knows the futility of conflict and the righteousness of cooperation. This ain't one of those cultures anymore because our rulers know that we see their plan for what it is. They try to cause confusion by labelling us politically as right-wing, left-wing or centrist, and using this deception to divide us, when in fact we are for the most part just realist. It's the oldest trick in the book. Through media manipulation, assigning pejorative status to the terms left and right, and thereby setting one against the other. As a result, areas of agreement remain unexplored, as one end of the spectrum regards the other as having nothing good to say, and thus ignores it. I, for one, am not falling for this con trick, and neither should you. Allow me to illustrate. So I believe that all essential infrastructure should be in public ownership. Water, energy, transport, communications and others. All should be returned into the state's hands to stop us all being ripped off with costs far in excess of any other European country, and to abolish the need for corrupt industry regulators whose bosses invariably end up working in the industries they're supposed to regulate, so never really, regulate. I believe in strong and effective public services, particularly healthcare and social care, because we've become very good in this country at commodifying the sick, vulnerable and elderly, so that they've become nothing more than a cash cow for American hedge funds. This has to stop. The utter stupidity of successive governments who have sold off the nation's assets to the private sector only then to rent them back at a hugely inflated cost is nothing short of the crime of the century. And to think that this has happened largely because those doing the selling, our elected leaders, have done so to endear themselves to their rich corporate pals and to line their own pockets. We need to be more angry about this. I believe in taxing the billionaire classes in order to improve the living standards of the working classes, whose hard graft made those billionaires in the first place. I particularly believe in taxing massive unearned inherited wealth, because if people like my father had not fought to keep us from tyranny 8 decades ago, that wealth would have become rapidly abstracted by an evil conquering power. So be a bit less greedy and a bit more grateful is all I ask. After all, a more equal society is a more contented one and a more stable one. Build more social housing so that future generations can enjoy the simple dignity of their own home in which to bring up a family and contribute to the country's growth. So I hear the cries of loony left policies, but get this, I believe in a much bigger, stronger and better equipped military. I believe in retaining and making more independent our strategic nuclear deterrent. I believe in the need for better, more intelligent immigration control, where we only accept the people who have the skills and qualifications we need to make our country strong again. If they fit these criteria, then they can bring their spouses and children, but not the rest of the clan. End of. I believe in having a bigger, stronger police force forced on tackling real crime and disorder, and not hurty words on social media. I believe that anybody can identify themselves however they want and live their lives as they want. But I don't want that constantly ramming down my throat through an entertainment industry hell-bent on churning out hugely unrepresentative content in an attempt to condition me. All sounds very right-wing, eh? But in the eyes of the establishment, particularly toilet paper tabloids like the Mail and Express, the two policy positions I've just outlined are incompatible with each other. They dismiss the very thought that ordinary folk might be able to hold two concepts in their head at the same time, yet it is those very Fleet Street establishments where the real thickos reside. You know, people like Little Dick John and the rest of the parasites being paid a fortune to write schoolboy bullshit unworthy of featuring in the Viz comic, let alone a national newspaper. Why do people allow themselves to be manipulated by these morons? Do you see my point? The establishment insists that if we believe in A, B and C, we must therefore also believe in X, Y and Z. This ultimately manifests itself in an electoral system in which the best we can hope for is to vote for the least worst outfit, or just not to vote, or if we're really stupid, to vote for who we're told to by elements of the media. Stripped of all ambition and principle, we just have on offer a political class whose only shared belief is in their own personal gain. From far left to far right and at all points in between, all I can see is weakness, confusion, contempt and greed. So I refuse to be labelled by anybody, and I refuse to believe we're beaten. A country that can rebuild from bankruptcy in the aftermath of World War can recover again from the wounds inflicted over the last 4 decades. As to how we do that, well, stay tuned to this channel and let's explore the options. Thank you for listening.